$5.2 billion for not turning off some phones. They brought in a former US Attorney General just to survive this. And somehow, this fine ended up making the company stronger. In October of 2015, Nigeria's telecom regulator did something almost nobody saw coming. They fined a single company $5.2 billion. Not a typo, $5.2 billion. For context, that's more than double the company's entire annual profit. The company was MTN, Africa's biggest mobile network. And the crime was failing to switch off SIM cards fast enough. That sentence alone doesn't explain why this became one of the most dramatic corporate standoffs in African business history. So let's get into how a paperwork deadline turned into a $5 billion fight for survival. To understand this story, you have to go back to the year 2000. Nigeria's telecom sector at the time was basically broken. One state-owned company, Nitel, controlled almost everything, and it barely worked. So the government decided to open the market up, auction off licenses, let private companies build real networks from scratch. In January 2001, that auction happened in Abuja. 3 companies won licenses. One of them was MTN, a South African company hungry to expand across the continent. Another was Econet Wireless, led by a Zimbabwean businessman named Strive Masiyiwa. And the third license went to a company called Communications Investment Limited, backed by a Nigerian businessman you might already know if you've been watching this channel. The same man behind the empire we call the Bull. He lost that license within weeks when his company missed a payment deadline. 2 years later, he came back and built Globacom instead. A story with its own billion-dollar twist, which, if you haven't seen it yet, is genuinely one of the wildest founder stories on this channel, worth going back for after this one. But MTN didn't miss their deadline. They paid $285 million for their license and launched service in August 2001. And Nigeria, with its massive population and almost non-existent phone infrastructure, turned out to be the single best bet MTN ever made. Within a few years, Nigeria wasn't just another market for MTN. It became their biggest market, period. By 2015, Nigeria alone made up 37% of MTN's entire global revenue. One country, more than a third of the whole company's income. That's important to understand because it means whatever happened next in Nigeria wasn't a side issue for MTN. It was existential. Now here's where the story shifts from business into something much heavier. Starting around 2010, Nigeria introduced a new rule. Every SIM card had to be registered with real identity documents. On paper, this sounds like basic housekeeping. In practice, it became a national security issue. Nigeria, at this point, was in the middle of a brutal insurgency. Boko Haram was carrying out attacks across the northeast, and unregistered, untraceable phones were reportedly being used to plan and coordinate some of those attacks. In September 2015, a former Nigerian finance minister was kidnapped, and his kidnappers were using unregistered SIM cards to communicate. That case became a turning point. Government pressure on the telecom companies went from routine to urgent almost overnight. In July 2015, Nigeria's Communications Commission gave every mobile operator a hard deadline. Deactivate every improperly registered SIM card. No exceptions. Most operators scrambled to comply. MTN, the biggest operator in the country with tens of millions of subscribers, didn't move fast enough. By the deadline, roughly 5.1 million lines on MTN's network were still active, still unregistered, still untraceable. To the regulator, that wasn't a technicality. That was a company sitting on millions of anonymous phone lines in a country actively fighting a terrorist insurgency. So in October 2015, Nigeria's Communications Commission dropped the hammer. 200,000 naira, about $1,000, for every single unregistered line. 5.2 million lines. You do the math, and it comes out to 1.04 trillion naira, $5.2 billion. To put that number in perspective, MTN's entire annual profit at the time was less than half of that fine. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was a number designed to be existential. The day the fine became public, MTN's stock on the Johannesburg Exchange dropped 14% in a single session. Billions in market value gone before lunch. What happened next moved fast. Within weeks, MTN's CEO resigned. The company brought back a former chairman to take direct control and lead the fight. And then MTN did something almost nobody expected from a foreign company facing an African regulator. They hired Eric Holder, the former Attorney General of the United States, the man who'd sat in Barack Obama's cabinet, now leading MTN's legal defense against Nigeria's telecom regulator. MTN took the fight to court, arguing the regulator had no legal grounds to impose a fine that size. And that decision, suing instead of negotiating quietly, made things worse before they got better. Nigeria's president at the time, Muhammadu Buhari, went public and effectively blamed MTN for helping Boko Haram survive, as long as it did, pointing to thousands of Nigerian deaths since the insurgency began. Think about that for a second. This was no longer a regulatory dispute. This was a sitting president accusing a telecom company of contributing to a terrorist body count. MTN eventually backed off the lawsuit, made what they called a good faith payment of $250 million, and moved the whole fight into private negotiation instead. After months of back and forth, reductions floated, then walked back, then floated again. MTN and the Nigerian government finally landed on a number in June 2016. 330 billion naira, about $1.67 billion, roughly a third of the original fine, paid out over 3 years in 6 installments, the very last one landing in 2019. But here's the part that makes this story worth telling. The settlement came with a condition attached. MTN had to list its shares on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And they did, finalizing that listing in 2019. Something that had been talked about for years, but never actually happened because of the fine that almost broke the company. Fast forward to today, and MTN isn't just surviving in Nigeria, it's dominant. Over 95 million subscribers, more than half the entire Nigerian mobile market. Its stock on the Nigerian exchange trades near record highs with a market cap north of 17 trillion naira. The company that almost got fined out of the country is now more deeply embedded in it than ever. So what actually happened here? A missed compliance deadline turned into a fight that cost MTN a CEO, cost them billions in market value, and forced them into direct conflict with a sitting president. And yet the forced resolution, the public listing they were pushed into, ended up anchoring them even deeper into the Nigerian economy. Sometimes the crisis that almost kills a company is the same crisis that makes it permanent. $5.2 billion started as a punishment. It ended up as the reason MTN Nigeria became a public company Nigerians could actually own a piece of. This has been the Empire Desk. If stories like this are your thing, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.